So, hey, it would have been fun.
Yeah.
All right, should we go live? Here we are, gentlemen. I've got Chandresh Pala and Anirban with me. Now, I'm going to talk about Anirban first because I came across his profile on LinkedIn. I haven't met you in real life, Anirban, but I was really, really impressed about one or two things in specific, right? One is that I think you graduated in 93, and then instead of doing perhaps a regular MBA or something like that, you just went into the agency life and lived that life for quite a while, to be honest. And then you shifted over to the consulting side. And in the meanwhile, you've also taught semiotics, which I find a very sexy subject, something that is really interesting and something that can have an impact on a lot of things. And you've taught it in MICA, where it's tough to teach something in MICA, so as you would probably expect. And I'm sure that if since you've gone there a few times, it means that they've liked you. So I just found that fact that you've been there and done that from so many angles makes you a fascinating person for today's topic, yeah, and probably a lot more, but certainly for today's topic. Welcome to tell me about it.
Thank you, Siddharth. Very kind words. We're very excited to be here. I've been following this for a while. I've been seeing this pop up on my social feed. And like I said, the traveling professor is something that I've now registered. So even though we've met, I've had a chance of listening to you speak to a whole bunch of very interesting people. Very
Thank you
happy
so
to
much.
be here and very happy to kind of be on the same screen as Chandresh.
Yeah, well,
Looking forward.
now let me go on and talk about Chandresh a bit. As I was telling you, he's played so many roles with me. Boss, mentor, partner, friend, colleague, and somebody who's also, I think, some kind of major black belt in some martial art. Okay, and
Kung
he's
Fu.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, kung fu. There you go. And I've been so scared of that ever since he's told me that. I've stayed a couple of feet away. But besides that, he's also somebody who's done his BSc in physics. That is a very, and with honors as well. So that's for some quantum physicist to come. That's the first Chandresh for tell me about it. You've come. You literally are the scientist in the room.
You're scaring everyone. They're all going to sit there.
No, and plus the attractive factor is the charming UK accent. So you'll get away with murder on this one, Chandresh.
Right. No, I'm absolutely delighted to be, on the show. And, like I was saying earlier, when we were just chatting, it's always a pleasure talking to Siddharth, because the conversations that we have are just incredible, because we go off on these rambling discussions and they end up in all kinds of places. So it's always fascinating, having discussions with you and, knowing you for such a long time. And it's a pleasure to meet you, Anirban, as well. So I'm looking forward to the session.
Wonderful. So let me just introduce today's topic, and then I'll shut up. I'll just keep asking questions and poking you guys throughout the hour. So the topic for today is, look, a lot of people actually want to know what a winning pitch is. Now, a winning pitch or a winning presentation or a winning presence, or you may want to, analyze and describe it in many ways, right? But what I thought would be fascinating is, Chandresh, you are an angel investor or a VC or you're a designer studio for doing something like this, and you've also are an entrepreneur, been an entrepreneur, right? And you've been a bit of a consultant as well. So there are many angles that you're bringing to the table, right? On how you judge a presentation, a pitch, or and Anirban comes in with his perspective of both an agency. So when an agency is going in to pitch for new business, for example, or when an agency is trying to retain an existing account or whatever, so many permutations and combinations. And now he's on to the consulting side. So I just thought, I would kickstart this discussion by asking both of you, how does one prepare for a winning pitch? When does this preparation start? And I would like you to put on a particular hat and talk to me through that hat, and then switch over to that to the other hat, because you both are going to play two different roles. So I'd like to go with Anirban first and ask him, how would you recommend people prepare for a pitch if you're working in an agency? And then you can go on to the other side, the consulting side, and then we'll go to Chandresh.
Funnily enough, I mean, on the agency, of course, you're always, you're pitching new business, you're pitching new ideas to clients. And interestingly, when you're in consulting, you often find yourself on the other side of the table, where you're sometimes looking at these pitches and you're looking at these agencies while simultaneously being one who's also pitching ideas to these clients. Because eventually, as a consultant as well, you're kind of, you are offering a solution for a brand, for a problem. So you're both simultaneously pitching for pitching a solution as well as evaluating solutions at different stages of projects, at different stages of solving a problem. But I mean, and traditionally, I grew up in the advertising business at a time where there were these little stunts that agencies would pull, and actually, when you think about it now, it's quite cringy. Because I do remember a particular occasion where the agency that I had once worked with, where I started my career, there was a pitch presentation to a tea board, where in the middle of the presentation, somebody walked in who kind of was dressed up like a tea garden tea picker, one of the laborers who would, So it was it was ostensibly to demonstrate commitment, and this was quite common. It is not very different from the person who stands outside the tent at a fairground, showing you the beginnings of a magic trick and hoping that you kind of walk into that tent. I mean, to me, that's the mental model of what's really going on there. But it's, over the years, and especially now, and having kind of gone through this entire wave of startups and pitching for investment, pitching for business, the agencies pitching for brands, you actually think about the pitch itself becoming a product. I mean, if you go online and just type pitch, it's flooded with offerings. It's flooded with pitch coaches. It's flooded with all kinds of gizmos and the ways in which you can package your truth and ways in which you can package your ideas and what are the key things that Shark Tank judges talking about things. So it's a and when you look at that massive marketplace for pitches, you realize that it's a very elusive thing. It's a slippery thing, this thing called a pitch. Because had it not been so, you would not have so many people selling so many different kinds of answers, sometimes the same answer repackaged in very different ways, trying to offer a solution.
Right.
And it's interesting because when you say that it's become this product, it's being packaged in so many different ways. And when you kind of finally break it down, you take all of pitch coaching and you break it down, and you take all of the pitch consulting and you break it down. It tells you two things, and these are very basic things. It talks about presentation skills or persona marketing.
Okay, so let me stop you there. What do you mean by persona marketing? What do you mean by
this is what I was talking about. I mean, for instance, you go to, if you're in let's say in some sort of a creative pitch, and I'm talking about, and it could also apply, though I will use the specific example of a creative pitch here, it also applies to, pitching for investment, which is what hat are you wearing? What persona? What are you playing? What is the game that you're playing? And here there are some interesting there seems to be some interesting archetypes or whatever you want to call it at play. So there is this one kind of way of doing, which is where you make the person you're pitching to a collaborator in the process. You get them to own the idea. You say that, do you remember feeling this way? And the moment you do that, you've invited that person to join in and feel like a collaborator, and you're hoping that eventually they will start owning your idea.
That is so interesting, because then what you're doing is actually connecting to different parts of the human brain, the way in which you're describing your process. Interesting. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
No, and actually, when you think about it, these are all different ways of managing a power equation. When you're pitching, there is a power equation at play. Whether it's an investor, whether it's a potential client, and these are different ways in which you negotiate that power equation. So one way is to kind of garner that sense of collaboration by including that person into your idea, into the space. The second is where you actually invert the power equation, and that's where you play the creative genius, the artist. And where you kind of say that you have no idea as to what I'm talking about. You have never thought about anything this way. And I will blow your mind.
That's a tough one, though.
It's a tough one. Not everyone can pull it off. But that becomes another way in which you play that game.
All right.
And the third one is the one where you say that, I know nothing. I am just a simpleton. But I have something. Maybe it's worth, so, and so there's so many different strategies, so many different ways in which you play the persona game. And the thing is that it is manipulative, and I believe that the truth to a pitch, the perfect pitch, goes beyond something like this. It lies somewhere a little more deeper.
Okay. All right. Anirban, I'm going to stop you there and include Chandresh in this conversation and ask him his 2 bits, because he's seen a couple of angles as well. So, Chandresh, anything you'd like to contribute on how you would prepare for a pitch?
Yeah, I guess before I go into that, what I would say is when we talk about a pitch, a lot of people immediately think that it's like for investment or pitching to investors. But that's not true, because actually we go through life constantly pitching, because what we're trying to do is convince somebody about an idea, which is a pitch. That might be, talking to somebody, a prospective, future wife. You might be talking to, a potential professor, all kinds of.
Or present wife.
or present wife, pitching a holiday idea, So we're constantly going through life trying to convince somebody or present an idea. So pitching is not just for, for people who are doing investment pitches. I think it's really important to understand that. And the second thing is when I do work with people and startups and things, even though they're not pitching for investment, sometimes I get them to create a pitch, because it's about creating something which provides that clarity of thought. It's a great way of getting your mindset and getting all of the information together, clarifying your thoughts and really distilling them into this very concise piece of communication. And just going through that exercise is incredibly valuable. So, I use it all the time, when I'm working with startups, even though they're not raising investment, even just to get their ideas together.
That's so interesting. So let me pause you there for a moment and probe a little deeper. So what you're saying is, even if you're not making a pitch to an investor or something, you get startups to actually do that pitch for a deeper reason. Is that
absolutely?
Is that what
yeah. So I teach at an accelerator, and one of the outputs that I get the people to create is a pitch. For some people, they prefer it to create a pitch for a potential customer. As other people, it might be for potential, team members. It could be, but just going through that process of distilling their business model, distilling their core value proposition, and putting it down in very, very concise, brief details, and being able to talk about it is just incredibly valuable. So as an exercise, yes, I highly recommend it.
So if I have to ask both of you this question, because I've got a sense of the thought process that goes behind the preparing of a pitch, but I still want to understand, maybe from a different perspective, what is it that you've seen as when you see a pitch and you say, that's really, really good. Okay. This is done with a lot of diligence, a lot of care, and a lot of imagination, and a lot of pizzazz, or whatever you want to call it. How do you judge that? Because both of you have been on the other side. I mean, Chandresh, you can start. And
so I can add a few things. The way I think people need to get into a mindset when they are going into pitch. And that mindset is not, I'm going there to sell. It's, I'm going there to present this amazing opportunity and give people the opportunity to buy. It's a very different mindset. It's not, pushing. It's saying, hey, I have this amazing opportunity. I have this great idea. And it's about communicating that idea as clearly as possible to make sure that person understands it and is excited by it.
Correct.
The person understands it and they're excited by it. And also it's about authenticity. My view is, trying to do different tricks and things, for me doesn't work. I'd much rather see somebody who's absolutely authentic, who is genuine. If they are a terrible speaker, I don't mind, actually, as long as they're genuine, and as long as they know what they're talking about and, the idea is genuine. Them trying to do something very different, it just doesn't work. So authenticity, presenting the opportunity, and really being able to communicate that core idea. And I think also, it's very much you have to engage and connect with people in that first, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
If you don't connect and engage with the people in those first few minutes, then you're actually uphill, after that.
Yeah.
It's all about winning, right at the beginning, being in the right mindset, winning and going in with that, almost that energy. being authentic, I think, at the beginning. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks. Anirban, how about you?
Okay, I'm going to just, please indulge me. I'm going to kind of take a bit of a detour.
Sure, go for it.
I kind of, really, really resonated with two or three things that, Chandresh said in the course of what he just, the way he explained it. He talked about the idea itself and the power of that and the belief in that. And that is how you communicate. And the fact that it is distilled into a very, very clear form. And I think, there is no way. I mean, that is pretty much the holy grail of a good pitch. But I've been kind of thinking about this conversation, and interestingly, at some point, as you go through pitches, you start thinking about the pitch itself and what is it supposed to do, and you wonder for the first time, where did this word come from? Pitch. Where does it come from, and why do we call it a pitch? And when you think about it, and it kind of immediately kind of bifurcates into two different imaginations of a pitch. One is a baseball imagination of the pitch, or whatever, where you're essentially, you've got something in your hand, you're really hurling it, you see how far it goes, how fast it goes, how well it puzzles, the person on the other side, or, kind of, beats that person, all the logic, all the defenses, and gets through. So that's one imagination of the pitch. But what is a more fundamental imagination of the pitch, in my opinion, is where this word comes from. The pitch or dent stumps into the cricket pitch.
Yeah.
We call the football the place where we play football the pitch.
Yeah, that's right.
And what we are really doing is that if you think of the idea as a stake, you're really planting that stake somewhere.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
And if you think of the mind of the recipient, whoever that may be it a client or a customer or an investor or anyone, you are trying to understand. You need to understand that mind. When they say that read the room, who are you pitching to? That's what you mean. You need to know what that ground is like. And what you're really trying to accomplish is to kind of plant that stake in a way that it becomes impossible for that person to shake off that idea, that thought that you've planted long after that meeting is over.
Wonderfully put. Thanks. Okay, so that's really interesting. Now, that kind of segues very well into my next question, which I'll ask Chandresh, because I think you're a little winded and out of breath. So hang on a bit.
But I like that concept. I love that idea. Yes.
Yeah, it's a great idea. It's a wonderful idea. So here's the deal, right, Chandresh? How do you read a room?
I think before going into the room, it's about preparation. It's about understanding who you are pitching to, understanding the company, what their goals are, what their interests are, because what you're trying to do is to really understand, as much as you can before you go in the room, right? It's all about that preparation. And secondly, it's about knowing your own numbers as well. You need to have done your homework in terms of preparing about what you're going to be talking about. You need to have all the detail. You need to have done everything. I mean, there's a few little tricks that I can suggest as well when you go in the room, and these are a bit obscure, but for example, sitting in the right place. So for example, I suggest people sit near the screen. So when they're presenting, they sit near the screen, because rather than if they're sitting and sitting there throughout the pitch, they can change the energy by getting up and actually pointing at things and showing a bit of enthusiasm. So they can easily do that. The other reason is kind of an obscure, strange reason, is that typically that means that you are facing the doorway, right?
Okay.
Which puts you in a power position, because if your back is towards the door, then you're actually in a weaker position psychologically. Whereas if you think about most power positions, all the bosses sit facing the door because that's a power position, right? So there's little things like
the door.
well, it's always like the president sits, it's facing the door. It's so if you're in that position, you can then move, you can talk, and you can show people things that get that energy level, show that enthusiasm if required. You can control the room, you can control where it's going. But also I think you need to be, I was thinking about an analogy, and I love things like music. So I think it's like jazz, right? So you train and you train and you train, and you become a master of your instruments and, as a team. But then when you go in, you have to be able to improvise as well, because somebody absolutely will throw some curveballs in. They will absolutely try and put you off, right? And ask you awkward questions. So you need to be able to improvise and go off and, go with the flow and like jazz.
No, I understand. So, talking of awkward questions, let me ask the same question to Anirban with a bit of a twist. Okay. So, if you're reading a room and if you're trying to actually make an impact, while so does your mood need to be very calm yourself, or should you be excited, or how should you be like when you're pitching? And just as a corollary to that, and probably Chandresh can pitch in later on, do you think making a pitch is a team sport or is it an individual one? That's based on your baseball analogy.
Okay, let me kind of talk about a few things, and as an extension of what Chandresh spoke about in
Sure.
terms of the different things that work, I'd like to bring in my own little
Yeah.
analogy, or rather, my favorite example
Yeah.
of a pitch,
Sure.
and why that has read the room so beautifully, and how it has kind of converted something into a very, very powerful idea.
Wonderful.
But before that, I mean, it is indeed a team sport. I mean, very clearly, there is someone who goes and presents, and often, whether it's in an agency or a startup, it will be the person who has those skills, who communicates, because it is about that finally. But it is everything happens before that meeting. While you and I completely agree with the jazz reference here, that you must be able to give yourself space. I would take a football example, saying that how do I find myself in space?
Correct.
Where I can run, where I can look, where I can pass, where I can see opportunity.
Correct.
And that's where you need to find yourself when you're presenting. And so whether it means that, energy is that of someone who's really passionate, who's really energetic, or someone who's calm, it depends entirely on where you are at. And I think that's very important. You can't fake that. And it's silly to try and fake that. But you need to be that. You need to make space for yourself. But it is a team sport, because everything that you've done in terms of just getting your story together, distilling it down, saying that, okay, what is it that, and here is where the differences between, let's say, if I'm making a new business pitch as an agency or as a consultant, the differences between the client and the customer need to melt away, because you are eventually speaking to another human being sitting across that table, who shares the same desires, the same motivations as your, in some form or the other, as your customer.
Correct, I understand. But how do you read the room? How do you read okay, so this guy seems to be in a little irritated space. How do you do that? What cues do you look for? Or what?
Right. So to me, reading the room happens before the meeting, and you kind of try and rise above anything, in that sense, any moods that are there in the meeting room, because you cannot engage with that, and you should not engage with that. The reading of the room is deeper. It is not just about immediate at that point in time, what is my frame of mind. You are trying to reach into something deeper, and here is where I like to bring in my favorite pitch story, and it's a story that probably anyone who's watched Mad Men, or even if you haven't, you probably know that story. It's the story. It's where Don Draper pitches for Kodak Carousel.
Oh yeah.
The trade. For those who are unfamiliar with the term carousel, I mean, it's in the days of slide projectors, and you had this round tray which sat on the slide projector with slides inserted. It could go forward or backward, sort of rotate in that fashion, and that's how you would project slides. And it's very interesting. I think he talked about he says that new technology creates an itch, and your product is like a lotion that soothes that itch. But what we have here, and Kodak, I mean, the background to that meeting is that Kodak, this inventive, innovative company, for them, this what they called the wheel internally was very important, and they were looking for the word wheel in that pitch, and that's where they were coming from, and that's what he understood. And what he goes on to say is that this is not a piece of technology. This is a time machine that goes forward and backwards.
I remember that. Yeah.
And that lets you go back to that happy place that you thought you had lost forever. If you think about it as a human thing, everyone feels that way.
So this seems
doesn't
to be
matter who you are.
Anirban, I'm trying to play amateur Sigmund Freud here, but this seems to be your your go-to. You think that this works really, connecting with an emotion that the other person has felt, I think is key according to you, and then you can actually relate to that person and build something from there. Would that be right?
Absolutely. Why do we do the things we do? Why do we start a business? Why do we go about inventing something? We feel something very strongly. We don't have the words, or maybe we are not sort of looking at that emotion as an inventor or as a startup or as a brand owner. We are not looking at that, but we are driven by that.
Yeah.
It is, and suddenly when Don Draper stands up and calls it carousel, in a flash, you suddenly make sense of what you've been trying to do all this time.
Yeah.
And you know that even though you didn't call it that, that is what you were trying to do in your own human way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Wow, guys, by the way, I have started getting millions of questions right here. So I'm going to kind of move to some asked by people. So Anubhav Garg has asked this question to maybe both of you. How will digital impact brands in the post-COVID era? How should an agency pitch? Maybe this one is for you, Anirban. How should an agency adjust to the impact and pitch to brands? So have a think about it. I'll ask Chandresh this one because this one is coming to Chandresh. Could you share your experience as an investor as to what made you believe in a startup after hearing their pitch? Okay, so maybe Chandresh, you can go on this one, and Anirban, you can think of what's the best way of the COVID thing. Yeah,
sure.
Over to you, Chandresh. Yeah.
So the core thing when you're doing a pitch in a startup is for you to understand, does the investor understand the concept? Do they understand the problem? If they don't understand the problem, then you've lost them, right? So you have to connect and really understand and appreciate the problem that is being presented. If you don't do that, then all the rest is just, irrelevant.
Yeah.
So where I've been pitched to and that problem actually completely resonates with me because I think, actually that is absolutely something that I can appreciate is a big issue. Then you've got my attention, right? Then it's about the solution. Go on.
No, this is exactly what Anirban was saying.
Yeah, it's all about, getting that connection and really early on, because if you think about it, people that you're pitching to are really busy and everyone's attention span is getting shorter and shorter, right?
Correct.
So you have those first few minutes to really get that human connection, like Anirban was saying, it's that human to human connection, mental. And the reason is, you have to build that right at the beginning, is you have to give them a reason to listen.
Yeah.
And if you get that connection through them understanding what you're pitching, I've had people who just go off into this tirade of, fancy sentences and, great diagrams and things. And what they have missed is that the room actually doesn't understand the problem. Right? So they're talking about the solution before somebody's really connected with the problem. So it's, they're trying to explain something and they've lost the room, and it's
so let me put you on the spot here a little, Chandresh. Okay, so now imagine that you have to judge somebody that you have to invest in, right? And you're trying to understand that this person's IQ and this person's EQ, okay, emotional quotient and intelligence quotient, and you're actually coming across how would you grade? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how much importance would you place to IQ? And on the scale of 1 to 10, how much importance would you place to EQ? Perceived EQ and perceived IQ, of course.
That's a tricky question. I guess we don't really we don't really think about it. It is an emotional thing. I mean, it's a bit like when people are recruiting, for example, then somebody comes in. The research says that you make a decision about that person literally within the first few seconds, and then you go through the process to rationalize it.
That's right.
So any answer I give you will be a rationalization, which probably won't be correct. It is, you just get a sense of energy about that person, something, and it's really hard to quantify. And yes, it's also about, do I really understand? Are they presenting this problem and solution? Do I get the problem? Do I get the solution? And is the market big enough? It's those three fundamental foundations. Do I understand this problem? Is it something that is relevant, something that I'm interested in as an investor? Is this going to solve that problem? And and is the market big enough?
So what I like about your answer is that you're not talking of IQ or EQ, and you completely avoided my scaling of the thing. But what you're saying, is more important, which is, okay, you come across a presence, okay, and you either like that presence or you don't like that presence, and you're being very genuine about it. and then you're trying to rationalize whether you like that presence based on whether they're prepared, the kind of work that they've put in, are they genuine, and the rest of the stuff that you've spoken. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's the tangible things. As an
Yeah.
investor, you have to look at the numbers, you have to look
Yeah.
at the data. So it is data driven, of course.
Hmm.
So fundamentally, you do need to obviously look at the market, you need to look at the competition, all those things.
Yeah.
But actually, there's a lot of people out there doing amazing things and very often doing the same things. So you're having to sift between. It's again like recruitment. There's lots of people with the same degrees, with the same experience. With great CVs. Yeah. So how do you make that decision? And it does come down to, that connection, human connection. Are they authentic? Are they passionate?
Yeah.
Those are all things it's hard to quantify without that human interaction and judgment call.
Okay.
So it's a combination of left and right brain
Yeah.
logic. You need a combination of both of those, I think.
Yeah, perhaps it is a little difficult to put a scale on it. Anirban, have you thought about what I asked?
it's the $1 million question, which is right now. I mean, every
Really,
brand is asking.
really $1 million. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean billions of dollars. I mean probably, but to be honest, I mean it's not a single question. It's
not.
many questions because it depends entirely on the kind of brand you are and the kind of business that you're in. For instance, just to illustrate, today if you're a retail brand, you don't even see room to survive. You're struggling to survive. People have lost the confidence to walk into stores. I mean, the crowded places. So malls are shut. I mean, so it's a very challenging place for you to be in. If you're an auto company, you might be seeing some kind of uptick. Depending on how well you've been placed, how well you're branded, I mean, how strongly you kind of, what kind of equity you have with people, because suddenly you see an opportunity that, more and more people who've probably postponed the idea of buying a car will be kind of spooked by what is happening around you. The fact that there is no public transport, and you will kind of start looking at that as a, investment to make. It's suddenly an investment and not just a luxury or a indulgence. So depending on what kind of a brand you are, what kind of category you're playing in, the challenges, the questions will be very, very specific. Having said that, I think there is a larger need that will be, become very important. And I think, and for any brand at any time, what is important is a reading of change. Because what successful brands always do is come in and fill the vacuum sometimes, bridge some gaps, make some connections that change has come and disrupted. And sometimes there are also new opportunities that come into play. So it's very, very important for any agency preparing to kind of speak to brands to get a strong sense of the kind of, narratives today in people's lives, that are taking shape. And these are everyday conversations. These are thoughts that are building into narratives, as you hear more and more people saying the same thing. It's only when you have a sort of a pulse of that.
So can I ask you a related question? I mean, I've sat through a lot of agency pitches, and they all have this model. Okay, they all have this model, and this model is amazing. Like, this is what it is. But actually, if you sit through 10 agency pitches, is the same damn model, right? Now the thing is that if now that you've seen both sides, right? We've all learned, we've all done those damn models and the rest of it. If you have to advise an agency, you can take the COVID, post-COVID, pre-COVID, whatever scenario. What are the key elements that an agency must cover in their pitch to the client? Key elements, 1, 2, 3, whatever.
I'll actually focus on one, and then let's see if we kind of want to talk about more.
Sure.
What are you shifting? What are you shifting?
Oh, nice. Okay.
Are you bringing order to chaos? What is your solution? Because that is what you do as a brand. That is what you, and I would say that, this is not limited to brands alone. I could be developing a new app, which I'm pitching to a bunch of investors or to a marketplace. But what am I shifting through that? And it's very important. And I think Chandresh very beautifully talked about the problem and saying that if the client doesn't get a sense of the problem, or the person on the other side doesn't have a clear sense of the problem. And that's exactly what I'm saying in a slightly different way. What are you shifting? And that is the question to be asked.
So
and that needs to be out there.
You're also talking of a shift of perceptions. What are you shifting means also in the mental realm.
That follows, but I'm essentially saying is that what is the frame through which I look at this thing?
The problem,
and there are so many different ways of doing it. I mean, for instance, let's say you could be a productivity app, which says that I am bringing order to chaos.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're changing something. There is an existing way of doing things.
Yeah.
I'll talk about my own personal favorite example from my back in the younger days of a planner in an agency. My favorite pitch of all time. We never won that pitch, but it was a sort of an important moment for me. We were pitching for Xerox. It's a big brand, and I was enamored by technology brands and their Palo Alto stories and all of that. And this was Xerox just before it kind of shut down, unfortunately, who were trying to kind of keep up and struggle with a digital world of the workplace where you had printers rather than Xerox machines.
Yes.
The whole workflow had changed, and you were trying to sell a printer, being a copier brand.
Right.
What was fascinating is that you go back and say that what kind of a brand are you? You're a document brand. You come from a world where you looked at reproducing, kind of, you're copying like an assembly line. You're kind of multiplying, and you're making labor. You're essentially taking labor away. What I would earlier copy with a carbon paper, today I use a Xerox to do that. So you've taken manual labor away, and that's your intervention.
Yeah.
But this world is a world of ideas. It's not a world of mass production. Yeah. It's the world of creativity and coming up with new ideas. That is what this digital world is about. That is what it enables. And how do you speak to that?
So why didn't you win the pitch?
Oh, it was interesting. They loved it. They loved it to the extent that somebody from some of their internal consultants from Palo Alto came down to meet us and talk to us and hear about what we had to say about Xerox. And I think that's what you do in a successful pitch. You connect with something which is there at the core, especially with strong brands. With established brands, there is a story. There's a powerful story. Over time, it gets buried. Management changes, people change, new kind of cultural influences come in, and somewhere that story is lost. It takes some amount of archaeology, and and this is not just getting into the room, but getting into the DNA of that brand, and saying that what is it that you're really about, and how can you speak to today? What can you change in today?
Yeah.
So, sorry.
Can I add to
go for it.
what Anirban's saying, which is, so one of the things that I look for and connect with, so I use a methodology for doing digital transformation and exponential organizations. And one of the key things that we look for at the top end, which is like the key principle, is something we call an MTP, which is a massive transformational purpose.
So there you go.
And that really connects with what you're saying, Anirban, which is, what is, as a brand or as a startup or as a company, what is your MTP? What is your massive transformational purpose? What is that big idea, which is independent of product? It's not, hey, we sell this. It's about that. What is that massive change? What is that shift, as you said, that we're trying to create? What is that impact in the world that we're trying to create? And increasingly, the companies that I'm seeing and the trend trying to promote is for companies to be both profitable, but also purpose-driven as well. So, having this idea that it's one or the other, I think is old school.
Yeah.
Right? So all the companies we're looking at and trying to build are ones where you're bringing both of those together. So there's purpose and profit, and they have some kind of massive transformational purpose. So that's that foundation.
That's very interesting. But I want to come back to that question that I was asking. And there was a reason behind, I was really genuinely curious as to why, in spite of such a wonderful idea, you didn't win that pitch, because it was leading to a question which I'd gotten out of my notes before. So one of the things was, how important is a pitch? And this question is for both of you. How important in the overall scheme of things? Sometimes somebody's uncle knows somebody's nephew, and that's why whatever pitch you make and nepotism. So you've heard the conspiracy theories and the stories. So I just again want to know, to your mind, how important is the pitch? Okay. Related question: what is the best outcome that a pitch can have? Because youngsters who might be listening to a program like this might think, oh, yes boss thing sort of happens. Chandra, that's a Shah Rukh Khan film thing, that you make a pitch and then everyone gives the order and the check is signed and stuff like that, and we know that shit doesn't happen. So what I'm trying to understand is what the best outcome that a pitch can have. So that's the second layered question. The third layered question is, do you really think an elevator pitch actually works? And if yes, why? So anyone, one of you. Those are three questions there.
Okay. I'll start with the third, and I think the elevator pitch works only I think there are some specific contexts. I think it's largely a myth. Yes, there are people who are waiting to latch onto a Hollywood studio executive in an elevator and narrate their story in 3 sentences, or a strategic investor, but it rarely plays out that way. If at all there is a way in which the elevator pitch works, is when a CEO talks to the other CEO in an elevator. And in passing, you say that, this is what you should be looking at. And it's not a pitch. It's just a friendly conversation.
Different level conversation,
And what you're doing is you're opening a door there, not closing a deal. That's how you open the door. So that's how I see it.
Okay.
I've forgotten the other two questions now. I'm trying to answer this.
Let Chandresh answer the elevator thing, and then I'll get back to you. Don't worry, I won't forget.
So the elevator thing, I think, again, it's about, you're not trying to sell something. All you're trying to do is to plant an idea and to make a connection to get a meeting, right? That's all it is. If you can interest somebody with an idea, it's like Inception, the movie, right? You just plant a tiny idea, have that connection, and, so when you call them, then they'll take your meeting. That, an elevator pitch can do that, right? So, and that I've seen that happen, right? In many ways, sometimes it's a great way of being able to connect with people who you can't connect with through the normal routes. If you send your pitch in through the normal routes, then it's not going to happen. But if you've met them somewhere through some human connection, then they're more likely to at least read it. So that's the stuff.
Okay. So again, coming back to the question that I had. How important is a pitch in this overall scheme of trying to win over a new relationship or win over a new investment? I think that was the genesis of the question. I think the second one even I have forgotten. So let's focus on that.
I think you also asked me why we didn't win that Xerox pitch. That was the other question. Okay, let me complete that loop for you, for everyone. So it was, eventually what we ended up with at this pitch was something much more ambitious than selling one printer. It was taking Xerox's philosophy into a new era. And unfortunately for us, it was ill-timed, because within, I think, a month or two of this meeting, Xerox shut down.
Okay. All right.
So it was already too late. The reason why they were interested and they kind of flew down all the way from Palo Alto was because I think nobody had talked about Xerox and where it comes from and how it can kind of play in this new sort of digital work context. And we did that, which was not limited to selling a printer.
I wish you had met them earlier, man.
So you have moments like that, but it was a very defining moment. You understood the power of what you could accomplish if you really got deep into something. What is the best outcome of a pitch? I think different contexts, different kind of answers here. I mean, if you're a startup pitching for money, if you're a startup looking for investors, your best bet probably in many cases is not a signed check, like you said, but the next meeting, which is a more detailed meeting,
so that's
which is
a good
more
outcome.
sort of that's a great outcome. If you're an agency pitching campaigns for a new client, and the best outcome is very different. Not only is it about winning that business at the end of that pitch, but it is about being able to sell the campaign that you shared on that pitch.
That's right.
The rarest of rare things. It's the rarest of rare things. It never happens. I mean, barely ever. That the solution you presented, because not everybody has the time and the investment made to understand a problem in its fullness. And therefore to share a solution that truly is aligned to every aspect of that business problem or that brand's problem. So it's the rarest of rare cases. You win a pitch. Not only do you win a pitch, your campaign goes through, pretty much as it is. That's the holy grail there.
Wonderful, thank you. That was pretty good. Chandresh, what about you? What do you think is the relative importance of a pitch in the overall scheme of things?
So I'll answer the part of the previous question as well. If you look at the numbers, if you're raising investment, then you're going to do a lot of pitches, and 99.9, won't be successful, right? So that's just the numbers, right? So the way to look at it is not that it's an unsuccessful pitch. I think the most important outcome is that, did you learn something from that?
Okay.
Did you actually learn something about how to improve your next pitch? Because if you've done that, then you're gaining, right? So if you go in with that mindset that you're going in there to learn, okay, so now I've learned that this is the bit that's missing, or this is maybe something where we need to strengthen, or this is something that we hadn't considered. If you go in with that mindset and come out with that mindset, then you're never a loser, because you're always learning and you're getting better and better. And let's face it, all these big, unicorns, all of them did a lot of pitches. None of them were like the magic, like in the movies, like you said. You do that one pitch and people give you big checks. That's not reality. The reality is that everyone gets turned down many, many, many times, and we all know all the stories, right? But the key thing is
actually,
you learn it.
Chandresh, most of them, the stories are below the radar. So in the media, you only hear about who's won,
Of course, that's the media, right? So
that's the media.
it's the extremes, isn't it? It's like, it's always the extremes, either you're terrible or you're like Superman, but the reality is that, most people have gone through many, many iterations and many pitches, and also not to take it personally. If somebody doesn't get your idea, or if somebody doesn't believe you, don't kind of, take it personally.
Okay.
That's, maybe it's a not good fit, maybe you've been saved, because remember, a pitch is not just them buying you are buying them as well. It's a two-way thing. Yeah. So if you go with that mindset, do we want to work with this investor? Do I actually want to be, connected with this investor? So it is about those values as well. Does this person have the same values, the same vision? Are these people that I want to work with? It shouldn't be like, please give me money, please give me, it should be a mutual understanding, a mutual connection. So that's important.
Thank you. Now I've got one individual question for the two of you, coming from, one is by Nitin Goel, and I'm going to give it to Anirban. What are your top suggestions for pitching for creator collaborations in the digital sphere, especially with everything moving online going forward?
Pitching for digital collaboration.
Yeah, so creator collaboration. So in the digital sphere, what would your top suggestions be like?
I mean, to put it very simply, I think the first thing is something that Chandresh, I think, just touched upon. It's you're going to collaborate with someone to create something. Where do you stand? I mean, where, in terms of your individual beliefs, in terms of what you're doing. And without that, it's very unlikely that collaborations work. Collaborations are very tricky because it sounds really exciting, and it's a new form of work. You reach out, you create a little collaborative, and you function, and you produce something. You dream of producing something magical. You bring together skills that you probably don't have as an individual, and that's what you're trying to overcome. But it's so important that everyone's aligned to what is being really done here.
So how do you do that when you're working remotely? I mean, it's so difficult, right? I understand what you're saying. So just don't look at strengths, look at the value system underlying those strengths, and see if that there's an alignment of values. I get it. How do you actually make it happen is what I'm trying to figure out.
Honestly, I mean, it's not too different from how it would normally happen, because what would happen normally? Let's look at a non-COVID situation and non-digital only kind of interaction situation. And what would one do? We would meet each other. We would sit down over a drink or a cup of coffee and have a few conversations. It is through those conversations that we get to know each other. We know that what am I in this game for? What am I playing to win? And it is there that you find common ground or not, and then that is how you kind of build your network. And I think that it is through those conversations. And I think it's like how you and Chandresh introduced your how you know each other, and you talked about these rambling conversations that you both enjoy, and that's good enough, and that sustains you over the years to keep kind of reaching out to one another.
Yeah. Okay. I got it. I got the gist of what you're saying, Anirban. Thank you so much. Okay. One question to you, Chandresh. Like, why do you think only tech startups are given the money? Why no create? It's a question coming from people in the live stream. Why not any creative? Why are there no takers for creative startups? Why only tech startups are seen in the fray?
I don't think that's entirely true. I think there is money going into some creative startups, but yes, the bulk of money is in tech startups. And And the reason is very simple, is because they are very scalable. You have the ability to create something which is super scalable, can have massive impact, can have huge revenues, very quickly. So that's the key. And there are tech companies which are very creative as well. I'm a big design and creative fan. And the best companies are the ones that actually incorporate great design, great creativity, and utilize technology. So I think the best companies are the ones where they bring the scalability of a technical solution, but then all the human interaction, the user experience design, great branding, all of those creative elements, and put the two together. I think those are the companies that do well.
Okay, so there are some immediate responses that are coming on my WhatsApp live stream and says, look, startups are also have the highest failure rate, right? So what do you have to say for that? What I'm just connecting something that Vyom has said, that do you think these guys need the right pitch, or it's going to work as long as you have built something whizzy bangy?
Okay, so if you look at the numbers for startups, yes, most of them fail, right? Irrespective of whether they're tech startups or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
The advantage tech startups have is that it's actually doesn't cost very much if they fail, because the cost of building a tech startup now has come down massively, right? If you're building like a property startup, or you're building a hotel or something, the cost is huge. Pharma startup, any of those other industries, the cost is much higher. The reason why more tech startups fail is because there's a lot more startups that it's just the volume, right? And it's just easier to start up.
Okay, all right.
What's the second part of the question?
No, it was just a comment on, does somebody who has something whizzy bangy, does he need a great pitch, or it is like, I've got Google.
See, whizzy bangy doesn't sell, right? It's all about going back to those core things, right? Because it's about saying, does it solve a real need? Is somebody willing to pay for solving that problem? Is there a big enough market for that, whizzy bangy thing? It's never about some clever technology. There's been some great technologies that have been created through the years and have ended up in the graveyard of companies. It's never about the best technology,
Yep, absolutely. All right.
Can I add something to what Chandresh was saying there, if you don't mind? We talk about failure rates of startups, or where they fail to kind of generate enough investor interest, and if you really go back to it, where are things going wrong most of the time? And I believe that if you think of when you think of society, and we say that society exists through communication, and business also exists through communication. But I would actually like to push that a little more and say that actually we don't exist through communication. We exist in communication.
Oh,
we are
nice.
we are forever acting through our words. And that is, unless as a new idea, unless you're able to frame it in terms of action, your likelihood of failure is high.
Love is a verb.
My favorite example of that is actually not from the world of marketing, but probably one of the most powerfully marketed ideas in India. It is Gandhi's Satyagraha. It's action. It is not non-violence, which does not suggest action. It suggests the absence of a certain kind of action. But when you say truth force, which is what Satyagraha means, you've been able to kind of actually brand it in a very specific way for a very specific audience.
Well put. Yeah,
he was the
last great mass communicator, man.
Yes, and in that single word, you have collapsed kind of all action, and without words, we do not have action.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And I would completely echo what you're saying, Anirban, because what I look for is, does this opportunity, does this solution connect with some underlying core human need? It's got to connect with some core primitive human underlying need, and if it does, then it's more likely to succeed.
Okay. I'm going to now ask,
change. Over time, those don't change. They are always there. So.
Yeah. Sorry, Chandresh. Sorry to interrupt you. I was just about to say that I'm now going to ask you one really difficult question just to end it, just so that I'll have some fun out of it.
Okay.
So, the question is, what? Okay, you have to recount one funny incident. Okay, it'll be even better if things were chaotic and you failed in it dramatically or some funny thing. I'll certainly add mine as well, and and that involves Chandresh. It was a really funny incident. So Chandresh, you can't steal that one for me. So I'll start off, and then you guys can end it. Now this was a few years back actually, and Chandresh, me and a colleague of ours, Kaushik Sen, shout out to Kaushik. We were trying to make a pitch, and we were in a car moving from one meeting to the other, and we needed Wi-Fi, and so we didn't know where to get it, and so therefore we ended up in a pub, which was like a villagey pub,
Yes.
in a
I
remote village
remember.
somewhere in the UK. I'm sure
Yes.
Chandresh remembers that,
Yeah.
and it was surreal because there were these elderly British, gentlemen looking at us very
In the
strangely. We
country who don't really see very many brown people.
brown people in a pub opening up a Wi-Fi. They must have thought we are going to bomb the place. I'm telling you. No, that was really fun. It was the funniest sort of situation, and thankfully it ended up in some kind of success. But I think for drama, it doesn't come better than that. I mean, you have to be there to see it. So I've done my piece. Now you guys go. Tell me a really interesting situation that happened.
So I can cover one.
Chandresh?
Yeah. So we were, and I don't know if Siddharth remembers this one. So we were at an exhibition on a stand, and this was early days. One of the first times we'd actually had a stand, and literally we had no idea how to put up stands. We had created these posters, and we'd used blue tack to put these posters up. And we had this small stand, and we were actually visited by an executive from a big company. It was like it's probably the second biggest in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I'm there trying to be cool and trying to do this pitch while he's sitting there. And at the same time, from the corner of my eye, I can see this poster slowly peeling off, and slowly, and I'm trying to be cool and continue giving this pitch. And yet I'm seeing this big poster slowly coming off, and
I was going to think that it's going to fall on his head.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's where all that ability to try and keep cool and keep going, it really, and it did come off, but thankfully it didn't fall on him. And then thankfully we just continued and kind of said don't worry about that, So, but yeah, stuff like that happens.
Anirban, over to you. I'm sure yours will be the funniest.
I don't know, probably most embarrassing, most certainly. But this was my early days. I was just getting started in the agency as a planner, as a strategy person, and I was back in Calcutta then, and it's a small market, limited business. So and this was the early days of telecom. So mobile phones, so mobile phone service pitch, and it would have made. I mean, winning the pitch would kind of transform the fortunes of that office.
Right.
And there's a new MD on the other side, the client side, and I was in full flow, at the pitch presentation talking about, because this was the day when mobile phones, both the phones and the service were hideously expensive.
Yeah.
Very few people could afford it, and I was kind of drawing this societal picture of our attitude towards consumption, and this was many, couple of decades ago, so or a little more, and I'm painting this picture of how we are frugal. And how we actually look down a little on conspicuous consumption and too many gold watches. And while I'm saying this, I noticed from the corner of my eye that, my agency head, my, all the big guys who come with me for the pitch, kind of, looking at me strangely. But I am completely flow, so I do not notice anything. And I go on with my little, side rant about how, frugal society, frugal consumption culture, looking at things like these, ostentation and etc. It's looked down upon, and gold this and gold that, and businessmen this and that. And at the end of the pitch, they said, did you even pause to see what he was wearing? He was wearing a gold chain. He was wearing a gold watch. He had many gold rings on his fingers. But we won that pitch. Clearly, something clicked. We won that pitch.
Realize a lot of times people think, it's that person.
Yeah, it's not me. It's that guy. It's that guy. So that was a bit hair raising till we kind of got the news. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow, 1 hour is up, guys. 1 hour is up.
Wow.
I
It
don't know
would
how
feel
long.
it.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you so much for a wonderful conversation, both of you. I really owe it to you. I think this is one of the most free-flowing conversations I've had in this particular series that we are running. Thank you. All mistakes mine. All awkward questions are my fault. Thank you so much, Anirban. Thank you so much, Chandesh. Do hang on. We would like to, introduce the rest of the team. But for the rest of you, bye bye, and hope you had a good time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.